Hello there, Oak Bloke here, and just wanted to cover off some news that came through on INOV, which is, of course, Schroders. Let's change name so many times. Schroders Capital Global Innovation Trust. There we go. Let's try saying that after a few drinks. So yeah, the kind of couple of things, I suppose. I mean, just kind of looking at the chatosphere here, there's some people sort of saying, "Oh, is it good buying? Is it good tendering? Is it not good?" So the answer is it's good either way. Is probably the way I would, uh, and how this article here was what I covered, and I think I've done a video on this already. So, but there is some new development, so it's worth watching this if this is of interest to you. So none of this is advice. It's just me talking about talking about this share. You make your own investment decisions, but I'm going to just talk through the logic of my thoughts on it. So, so look, the situation with INOV, and I covered it in this article, is that if we have a look at its makeup, we can see that now the market cap on it 102.7. To be fair, some of these things do change based upon, I mean, that 15.7p price. So it's 126 because obviously it's gone up a bit since I wrote my article. So 126.7 million. So that kind of leaves it on a discount, on an official discount of 28.3. And because it's got a load of cash, and some of that, that's cash as well, that's the basis for this tender offer. Okay, so if you sort of took that and did a tender offer or a buyback, if you bought back the shares at 15.7p, you'd end up with a discount of 39.6. Now, they're not doing buybacks, they're doing a tender offer, and they're doing a tender offer at an NAV or at a price close to the NAV, pretty much at the NAV. So the price being, so we can see it here in the news, 21.1, I'm pretty sure is the net value. So you can see that so it's basically the 21.36 NAV minus costs. There's about a quarter of a p per share being lost. So people will get 21.12p back. And that will essentially get rid of about 20, I think it's about 20, yeah, 21.4% of shares. So the remaining shareholders there'll be 78.58% remaining. Okay, so the point being, though, that the official NAV, obviously, there's rules that they have to follow for valuing things. The point of my article previously was to say, well, look, that is your official NAV, that you've got all these that plus these things is your official NAV. Okay, so that's kind of how we get to that 176 million pounds 80. And of course, the 21% of that that's coming back, 21% is about 36 million, something like that. So that kind of leaves about 140 million. But depends on how you look at these things. Excuse me. Depends on excuse me how you look at these things. I mean, I've not gone through every single one and sort of said, oh, that one should be worth more, this one should be worth more. There's potential for some of that to happen. There's also potential for more of the ex Woodford or even some of the ex Schroder to go down in value. Like, none of this stuff's guaranteed. Of course it's not. But I think the ones that are fair, in my article I said have got a very good chance of success. And in fact, the reason for today's video is this, which in turn is this. So the news that this week, and I don't know to what extent this has been sort of widely understood by the market. But Revolut are in talks of raising a further $1 billion. They would do so at a valuation level of 65. Now, when companies do up rounds, and if those up rounds are successful, it's not happened yet, but if they are in talks, so none of this is certain. But if that deal goes ahead and if the valuation is at 65 billion, well, the implication is that the stuff that these guys are holding, so part of this, I think Revolut comes under its growth area. In fact, see, I think I've got it here. So Revolut being somewhere in all of this, sorry, forgive me, I can't see it for the wood for the trees and all of that. Oh, there he is. There he is there. So yeah, he's a growth one. And this holding is at 14.1 million. Well, if you're updating or upgrading the valuation to 65, well, that's an update, or that's an upside of £8 million. So that's not in that price. That's not in that 21.1p that's coming back to shareholders if they take up the tender offer. So the way it works, I mean, I'll just kind of do an illustration for this. If half of shareholders say, yes, I want to take up the tender offer, and if half of shareholders say, I not only want to take up my proportion, my 21.46%, but I want to tender 100% of my shares. And if the other half say, no, 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 I've read the Oakblock article that says there's all these kinds of upsides. I want to hang on to my shares. I don't want to tender a single one. Thank you very much. Well, if that were to happen, and this is just an illustration, well, in that scenario, the people that have said yes to 100% of my shares would end up having sort of two times the 21% of their shares being tendered. They would, in other words, tender 42% or 43% of their shares, leaving them with 57% of their shares. Okay. If three quarters of the people say, I don't want to tender my shares, thank you very much, then they would get triple. So they would get 70% of their holding back in cash at 21.1p. So that's the way it works, is you're kind of, I mean, gambling's not the right word. You're assuming, or you're making a decision that well, either that you sort of say, well, no, I'm going to hang on and look for better value than the current NAV, bearing in mind that in the last update, I mean, let's not forget, in their last NAV update, now there's obviously been a lot of NAV updates where the NAV, the net asset value, has dropped, because I can remember this being about 29p, and it's now 21p. But I mean, it's gone up by 9.6% in 3 months in 2025 at, what a lot of people, including myself, are saying we're kind of at the turning of the tide. And what I mean by that is, I mean, there's money coming back into growth stocks, and my justification of saying that is, well, I wrote an article back here when it was at well, you could get it for below 10p. So this INOV tender offer, let's have a look. I had this one last October, and then this one recently. This is last month, and then this one is last month. That was my original one, where I was sort of saying, this, like many others, like if you participated in INOV, it's the most hated and loved, but like I wouldn't go near it because it just seems to be on a downward roller coaster, downwards. And yeah, so I've kind of talked about it a number of times. I suppose this one being a good example was, is this the most unloved? So October the 21st, which would have been back here, look, so below 10p, where I was sort of saying, look, and actually the point of this article, it was very interesting because everyone's sort of saying, oh yeah, oh, it's all full of like Woodford stuff, it's all rubbish. And it was like, well, actually, if you go through it all, some of it is, yes, some of it is ex Woodford, um, and some of the ex Woodford is, I don't want to say some of it is rubbish, but some of it has turned out to be rubbish, or at least has, I mean, and this is growth stocks, let's not forget, you know, there's a mixture of some stuff where the whole basis of investing in it was questionable, that it was just a bad investment, a bad idea. And some of it was like, well, it was a good idea, but they needed more cash in the environment last year, the year before. Could they have raised cash? Could they? Heck, no, no, they couldn't have. The market was closed. The market was just wasn't interested, and all these holdings could do was to go bust because they can't raise the funds, they can't get the growth capital. That's kind of change. I mean, for goodness sake, Revolut are sort of saying we'd like $1 billion, please, and there's a queue of people sort of saying, yeah, yeah, we'll talk to you about that. You know, that's a like could could Revolut have raised $1 billion last year or the year before? Doubt it. They didn't, did they? They you know, that's the reality of it, is that some of them just kind of like, if you're on a if you're in a jetliner and all your engines have stopped working, a bit like that Mission Impossible film, not so that latest one with Tom Cruise, and he's like in his aeroplane and his engine stops working and he sort of does all his little Mission Impossible stuff, gets the engine working, and the plane sort of after nearly crashing into the ground sort of zooms up in the air, and like he's just, that's another death-defying antic of that film. But sorry, joking aside, I mean the serious point here was that when I looked at this back last October, was like, okay, yes, there are some Woodford stuff in here, and yes, some of the Woodford stuff is questionable, and yes, some of it could still go bust and did go bust. AMO Pharma, Reaction Engines are two that I can immediately see there. But then there's others that have actually gone up in price. So think Nexion is a good example of that. That one is actually doing very nicely, thank you. And let's not forget, Revolut was one of his ideas as well. So it wasn't all bad. And I mean, as well, like look at all the blue Schroders. In other words, the like the bit that I sort of for me the big insight was when I looked at all the Schroeder stuff and I looked at the things that had gone up and down in value. I mean, yes, Woodford had lost 40 million. Okay, or sorry, yeah, Woodford was still worth 29, and that was down from 69. So, like 40 million loss on 70 is, I mean, I'm laughing about it. It's not a laughing matter, but you get the idea that there was a lot of stuff that just went to the wall. But then when I looked at the Schroders stuff, I was like, well, hang on a minute. Schroders have actually quietly been making a profit on this thing. Like, their performance is pretty good. I mean, to make 7.4 million on 51 million, that's 15%. I mean, I'm personally, I looked at that, and that's 15 million. Sorry, 7 million, but 15% in a period of time when, as I say, like there was just a really bad investment climate, really difficult investment climate. So to have turned a profit is quite impressive. That was my basis for sort of last October saying, look, I think this has got legs, and I think it is mispriced at below 10p. I mean, obviously now we're at 15.5p, so it's gone up 60, 55%, 60%, something like that. So I mean, it depends on where you've sort of, at what point in this journey have you joined the whole, if you're one of these people that bought it up here and are clinging on to it, and you've never bought more of it. That's the other part to this, is that, like, if you had bought it, let's say £1, like, and here you were back last October, having lost 90% of your investment. And obviously that's a difficult one to kind of say, I'm going to average down and, I'm going, some people do. But I mean, I always sort of say to myself, well, just pretend you haven't got if I did have a 90% loss, pretend you haven't got that. Just look at this with fresh eyes. Where will it go from here? Because if it will go up from here, it's worth averaging down. If it won't, then it's not. It's the catching the falling knife thing that comes into it. So, yeah, look, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I would say that those of you that hold on, that haven't participated in the tender offer, the point there is that I believe that there's hidden upsides in the sense that there's these potential distributions, which, to be fair, are long term. They're not necessarily sort of things that will be, like in the NAV update at the end of June 2025. Oh yeah, we've had 60 million suddenly added to the NAV. These are sort of things that will happen over the long term. But I mean, the companies that bought Araris and Anthos and Carmot. I mean, these are the likes of, forgive me, I haven't got the details to hand, but, Big Pharma. I mean, these are not sort of little deals. These are, you know, INOV had 0.5% stake worth 4 million. But the deal itself was sort of £1 billion deal or even more. So these are sort of not sort of little pokey irrelevant treatments. These are sort of multi-billion investments for big pharma. So could there be upside? Yes, I believe there could. The Revolut we've talked about, I mean, that feels, for them to be in talks, and even if the talks collapse and all the rest of it, clearly there's an appetite for Revolut. If Revolut IPOs, could it go to 65 billion on the basis that people are looking at it going, well, hang on, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, whenever they actually get to IPO, like, oh, they were talking at 65. I mean, that's the other thing here, is that even if those talks don't go ahead, there's kind of an implied 33% upside because there was talks about it being valued at 65. So it sort of like, you've just got to sort of take your own view on this. But of course, the other and final sort of approach to this would be to say, well, participate in the tender offer. Participate in the tender offer, but then when you get your proceeds, just buy back more shares. In other words, in a sense, that does become a little bit of a printing machine, and that's been my own rationale, is to say, well, even if everybody participates and I only get 21%, 21% of my shares realized, well, 21% on a 6p difference, okay, that's a guaranteed 1.2 pence upside because I can go and buy more, and essentially I've made 1.2 pence per share profit, even at 15.7p, or even at 15p. See, at 5.3p, it's 21%. That's about 1p. So obviously you've got to do your own maths there, but that's been my own rationale, is that, and because I do believe there'll be a lot, well, a lot may be an exaggeration, but there will be some people that say, well, look, I just want to sort of hang on. I don't want to tender my shares. I believe the shares going to go up. And there'll be some that are just too lazy to even respond. That they they don't even fill out the form. There's kind of a bit of a but there is some smart money on this. Is the other thing to say, is just quickly check that for you. But in terms of major shareholders, so 31% is held by large, by notifiable holders. So CLIG, City of London Investment Management, hold 14% of INOV. Momentum Global Investment Management hold 9%. First Equity hold 5.9%, BlackRock hold 0.8, Unicorn 0.7. So those guys, I mean, they're going to be sort of doing what well, I would very much assume they're going to be doing what I've been doing, looking at Atom Bank, looking at Revolut, looking at Araris, looking at Carmut, looking at Anthos, kind of figuring out where the 21p per shares are kind of, a good price to get a realization at. And probably, likely have sort of said, well, look, if if this, even half of this is sort of going to happen, I mean that equates to a 12p per share upside. Obviously, with 21% of the shares gone, that upside gets bigger because there's fewer people to share the upside with, if you follow me. So with um, 36 million sort of removed, the difference there of that 75 million gets shared four ways rather than five ways, if that makes sense. So the upside is actually bigger as well because of the tender offer. So yeah, look, and I think I sort of illustrate that here, where that sort of all comes to 32p. So all of so that one there is basically taking everything up to there. That bit there is taking the cash. So that sort of gets you to that 32p, or sorry, 33p, or 32.5. There we go. Let's just get it to three decimal places. Let's do those as well to three decimal places. There we go. You can sort of see it a bit more clearly now. Yeah, we'll just have to see, won't we? That and that yeah, I mean that's based on the post-tender shares dropping down to 635 million from what they were before. So yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because that then takes, again, if you strip out the remaining cash, you're looking at a nearly 60 million. Oh, sorry, start again. A nearly 60% discount. And it was at a nearly 60% discount when I wrote that article last October. So it's even though the share price has gone up 55%, the discount hasn't dropped because new value, new reasons for upside have emerged. Well, or potentially could emerge. So, as I say, no, this isn't an official NAV. This is if I describe that as a potential NAV, based upon specific um, upside cases happening. That's kind of where that number's coming from, uh, occurring or happening. So that's kind of where my mind's at with this. Anyway, hope that's been a useful talk through of INOV, and obviously that Revolut news is very good. I mean, of course, that is based upon it being at a 45 billion valuation. If we take it as uh, um, a 65 valuation, what I would have to do there is that would be a 7 million upside. So actually the numbers there change, and yeah, so we're above, yeah, so that sort of adds a penny there. So the NAV rises 1.1 pence to 33.6. So, on that basis, those people that are tendering their shares are doing so at like about a third below what the remainder will potentially have. And of course, this is based upon sort of there being nothing other than Atom and Revolut as upsides. And there's others there that could surprise us. And of course, the other thing that I've not done is there are these AI companies that have been growing like Billio. They bought this for 5.6 million. It's now worth 10.8. This is AI company two. This one's one of the other AI companies, and so is this. I mean, both that one and that one have doubled in valuation in a year. Um, as we all know, AI is a little bit of a popular investment area right now. Could there be upsides from those? Potentially. Could there be upsides from other things? Yes, potentially. There's and some of these as well. I mean, the buyouts that have happened with these Anthos and so on at Araris, uh, those were sort of phase two studies, phase three studies. There's others that are still with phase two studies, phase three studies. So there's more biotech that could could come good as well. So anyway, we'll see. And hopefully that video helps explain a little bit around my thinking. I'm going to do another video on Revolut, essentially the same news about the 65 billion valuation. So you kind of get the gist of it. I mean, obviously the bit that's going to be in the Revolut video is how that affects Molten Ventures and the evaluation of Molten Ventures. So join that shortly if you wish to. Okay, Oak Bloat saying cheerio for now. Cheerio.